Hello, I'm Luke Avedon. I'm here with Ivan, author of Shopify Theme Customization with Liquid, published by Packt, an amazing book, which I loved when I was trying to learn about the Shopify world. And I'm so happy that Ivan agreed to let me interrogate him. So thank you so much for doing this, Ivan.
Yeah, you're welcome. The pleasure is all mine to be here, Luke.
I really appreciate it. So I want to know your origin story because when we were talking before, that you are also a self-taught developer, as am I. So I'd really love to hear how you got started in development.
That is actually an interesting story. Before I became a developer, I used to work as a data entry worker. Like
Okay,
every night, I spent simply typing and retyping data into various sheets and everything. And I remember one day I was sitting with my best childhood friend, and I was discussing with him on how I don't see my quite there yet. Like that, I have found a calling that I see myself 20 or 30 years in front. And I remember him asking me, okay, but have you ever considered jumping into programming? And I remember looking at him, I was like, but isn't that just for smart people? Okay, why not give it a try? I was like, sure, okay. What do I need to do? And he instructed me. I sat to my computer. We opened some basic HTML, basic text editor, and I remember typing my first H1 heading with "Hello, famous hello world." Saved it as a HTML document, and when I launched it, I was like super happy. Like I did all of this. Like
it's
wow,
magic.
this is awesome. It was amazing.
So
Like
was it
now,
hard? I'm sorry.
when I remember of that, it's like super trivial, like it is nothing. At that point, I felt like I have designed a rocket for NASA or something like that.
Right, amazing. It is truly magic. Programming is so cool. Was it hard to break in? Were you already already had a job as a doing data entry already growing up?
Well, yeah. After that, I had to take some small pause, and I was working part time as I have promised myself that I will devote at least 5 to 6 hours a day. And for the next approximately 1.5 to 2 years, I spent every single day working and studying for about approximately 5 to 6 hours each day in
Wow.
order to get there. As I had somewhat of a handicap, as I didn't have pre-knowledge of that. However, I had some logic. However, but I still lacked something, so I needed to compensate.
Right, right. That is a very similar story to myself. I love stories like that. So why did you pick Shopify? Is that what you started with when developing?
Yeah,
Or?
actually, I found Shopify approximately 2 years after I started working. It was a bit of a luck as the agency that I applied to an agency called Hey Carson, and they were just basically a smaller agency back then. And I jump in there. They asked me whether I heard of Shopify, if I learned something about it, and I told them like, okay, I have some basic knowledge, not too much, but I was very willing to learn. And I remember first maybe month or two, I stayed approximately 12 to 13 hours every single day working, trying to compensate certain lack of knowledge and skills that I had at that moment,
Right, right.
which after a month or two basically decreased and was reduced to normal working hours. And basically, I loved working with Shopify ever since, as it was pretty easy to learn. And once you get into it, it is pretty versatile. You can create pretty complex things with it.
Right. Wow. So you were working for an agency. I had a fantasy of buying some Shopify apps on the side or something, which is why I first read your book. It seems like the Shopify market, it's all very small businesses, but are more enterprises using Shopify. Maybe that's a little
uh,
yeah.
Well, there are both. For example, during the 6 years that I worked for a company, we worked with even some majority of stores who are small owners, small startups, as you
Okay.
mentioned. However, there are even some large scale giants. I remember we worked with one stores from Holland, and I believe they had a revenue of like $1 billion on a daily level,
Oh my
and they
God.
were like they were like super huge. So they are quite large stores like that, enterprise level. However, they mostly rely on in-house group of developers, as
Hmm.
it is not. I'm not sure how to say, but having such a complex store, it requires that you have full control over your store without relying to a different agency that you know nothing about.
Okay, very interesting. So if you start freelancing in Shopify, you're probably not going to get those big enterprise clients. Um, so let's get into the nerd stuff. What is Shopify Liquid? Can you give us an introduction?
Wow, we're going to the hard questions already. Um, Shopify Liquid is an open source project with a very fairly simple syntax. It uses a template type language, which allows the developers to create reusable templates for different sections. Which is great for store owners, as it allows them to create any number of features and screens per their liking, without having to jump into the coding themselves or being the tech person at
Okay,
all.
so I can
When
customize the themes. It's on the server side, and we can customize any kind of widget in my store where I want, okay, this customer is here. Here's what you just bought, stuff like that, without a really hardcore developing a whole application.
Yeah, basically you can drag and drop different types of section, change any type of text, coloring, position, element, add new sections, add new blocks, without even looking at the code. That is why Shopify became very famous with non-tech people, as it allowed
Right.
everyone, even the someone without any tech education, to jump into the e-commerce business and to launch their store without having to rely on or employ developers at start, without even knowing whether their store is going to be a success or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was pretty surprised going through your book how easy it was to get started. So I could definitely see if you have never coded before, this would be a really great first language and project to get started with.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually the biggest problem that I had while writing the book.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I spent like a month thinking about how to create the flow, as my goal was to create something that will go from the start to the end, and to go in a smooth line, so that when someone looks at it, it all makes complete sense.
Okay.
Because I remember when I started, I had a lot of problems with that even the tutorials or some documentations, they would going from point A to point Z, then to point G and H, like it wasn't connected at all, and it can be a bit problematic. So my goal was to create a flow that will help anyone who decide to jump into. As soon as they read it, they can say, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, I wish I
I'm glad
had
to
sort of
hear that.
started with something like that instead of immediately jumping into .NET. So I was impressed with how simple it was to get going with Liquid. Uh, but so there's also Shopify Hydrogen. Do you know anything about that where that is like a complete framework? I don't know very much about it, but what kind of businesses, if I'm a merchant, I can pretty much just get away with Liquid, or more people jumping to building out a huge solution in Hydrogen? Or is that only for Shopify apps?
Well, there is a bit of hype at the moment. I'm guessing that it is also part of React related.
Right.
And basically, what you just asked is something that I answer approximately once or twice a week.
Okay.
And generally, what I usually, because there are always some small brands coming and asking, like, okay, I heard of something. I heard that it can generate a lot of revenue. It can speed up your stores. Like, why aren't we doing that?
Right.
And you basically have to explain it. I mean, for brands doing less than, let's say, 10 millions a year in revenue, my usual recommendation is to start building a basic website first, add some more advanced functionalities on your own, and start communicating the value of your brand to your customers and to
Mm.
your prospective customers. Basically, there's a whole marketplace of applications, forum posts on the internet, functionalities that are much harder to build when you are building things on your own. However, with Shopify, there are, of course, some limitation, which is when Shopify Plus or headless e-commerce start to make sense, and despite their higher complexities and costs, they become justifiable. For example, usually, at least what I heard of, it is usually a large enterprise level corporation with double digits year after year
Right.
growth that are deciding to jump into hydrogen, as this makes sense for them because how to say, with hydrogen and react with headless solutions, you build what you need, and to be precise, you build exactly what you need. You do not get some big modules that include features that you do not need or you do not use. For example, while Shopify is all-in-one no-code solutions, which is appreciative to most merchants, Shopify also does include some features and big modules that you don't need at the moment or will never use, which consequently affect your page loading speed and similar.
So it seems
With
like
hydrogen,
sorry, yeah.
yeah, with hydrogen you get some faster page load, time response, and consequently conversion rate, which
Oh, that's appealing.
considering that today customers are super impatient and
Right.
even waiting 1 second longer than they have to, they will leave, is greatly appreciated. I even think that I read somewhere that there is some study recently that said that shaving even 1 seconds of your page loading site can increase or decrease your conversion rate by 2%.
Okay, that makes sense. So it seems like it's part of React taking over the world because if I'm a React developer, I can switch to Hydrogen pretty easily, and then I can make whatever components I want, and it seemed pretty similar to React to me.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, even we have previously said what are pros, but there are even some cons to that. For example, major selling point of Shopify is that it is all-in-one and no-code solution. But with headless e-commerce, on the other hand, headless e-commerce is a complex process and requires approximately, let's say, 3 to 6 months to create your first application.
Okay,
Consequently,
wow.
you have to rely yourself on developers or in-house developers. You are responsible for security and handling updates. Where on the other hand, with Shopify, that is being handled for you. You do not have to think about updating your apps
Oh my gosh.
or updating npms or anything. You have no plug and play install of Shopify apps. No Shopify theme editor. You would have to either add content through React code yourself or to rely on some third party CMS. And last but not least, increase monthly cost.
Right. So are these pretty big teams when you work with if they're going to do the whole Hydrogen thing? I mean, is it 4 developers for 6 months? We'll get a pretty cool
Well,
project
yeah,
done, or
that is basically some basic time estimate depending on the complexity of the store.
okay, okay, interesting. So, and then there's oxygen too, which I guess does not affect liquid really, but is that part of like in the Angular world right now? There's hype about they're finally getting hydration in server side rendering. So I guess oxygen is a similar thing in the Shopify world, and then they're
Uh,
pushing something to do with edge commuting. So like you'll get the fastest possible page time because your store is rendered server side at a server closest to where the user is. Is that might be out of your area of
uh,
expertise, or it seemed pretty hyped?
well, yeah, definitely it is. Basically, hydrogens was had some let's call it bad press at the start,
Oh, okay.
as there were some people saying that yeah, hydrogen is cool and all, but you do not get to see the preview version before going live. You cannot compare the versions before launching them on your storefront. Like, you have to go live and then see, and it was all that. And I believe that launch of Oxygen was Shopify goal of having it all. in one place. As with
Ah,
Oxygen, you get to host your application for free. You can preview the versions before you go live. You can compare and discuss different versions of Hydrogen storefronts in an isolated environments before choosing a version for your production. And
wow.
and especially it is also super optimized to work with Hydrogen. So combining those two does make sense. And consequently, since it is a free tool, it also reduces the costing for going with Hydrogen and going headless.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So circling back to Liquid, so Liquid was actually created by the Shopify co-founder Tobias, and then uh, it actually there's interest in Liquid outside of just Shopify. Have you? Because I think it's in Jekyll. Do you find much Liquid outside of the Shopify world, or
Yeah, actually, when I started writing my book, I actually had to do some research on that topic as well. And I basically found a list. I think it was last updated in about 2020, and the list that I found of all the applications that are using a Liquid in their application was like outstanding. Like some of them, I don't
yeah?
know
Wow.
whether these applications are still using them, but was Jekyll, Salesforce, Zendesk, Discourse, and I believe even GoDaddy and GitLab were
Oh
relying on
wow.
Liquid. And when I read that, I was like super surprised. Like I'm not exactly sure what they are using for. I tried to get some additional information, but I wasn't able. But just reading that they are using that gives me a lot of a lot of pleasure that I know
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you're the guy. You're the Liquid guy. That's so cool. So
I
you
like
said
that man, the
one
liquid guy.
like the T1000. Uh, so when I was going through your book, the Liquid Core has the three main features: the objects, tags, and filters. Can you explain what those are? Did you know? Did I understand that right? Objects,
Yeah,
tags,
yeah.
filters.
That is basically something that I wrote about as the liquid core feature. As
Okay.
well, these three feature separately, they sound very simple. As for example, the objects are simply data structures that hold information in Shopify Liquid. They represent various elements within Shopify ecosystem, such as products, collections, customers, orders, and similar. And they contain attributes or properties that allows us to retrieve specific information about those specific objects. Tags, on the other hand, are control structures that use a logic and control flow in Liquid, allowing us to perform actions, controlling rendering, and manipulate data within templates. And
Okay.
lastly, filters are simple functions that allow us to modify and format data retrieved from the objects before we render them to the storefronts. And
Mm,
I remember when someone first asked me about the same to explain them these three things, and I did just like now. They were like, "Okay, that sounds super easy," and it is. But having a thorough understanding of these three and combining them will allow you to create allows basically Shopify to become from a static HTML template into a dynamic powerhouse it is today. As when you break it all down, these three elements are basically what represent Shopify today.
wow. Okay. Yeah, that was amazing. So then there's also content objects. That's different than those three main features.
Yeah. Content objects is, while they call themselves objects, they're a bit different from the one that we previously mentioned. The content objects are somewhat mandatory objects, as without them, our store would become basically a static HTML site without no usage. And we can split them in three different groups. For example, we have content for header object, content for index object, and content for layout object. And as their name says, they're pretty self-explanatory. For example, content for header objects is something that is placed inside head tag or inside a head HTML tag, and that tag is renders all of the scripts, all of the files that your Shopify store will require, and even some of the script and files that application that you installed in your store might require. Where the content for index object and content for layout objects are designed to show Shopify where it should render the files that the sections and files that we design inside Shopify Theme Editor. Basically, it connects Shopify Theme Editor with our static HTML file.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And then there's also the JSON type templates that work with meta fields. That was really cool. That was like later in your book. Just through sending JSON, we can do anything.
Yeah, basically, the JSON type templates were introduced let's say, about 20 or 30 days after I finished writing the last chapter of my book.
Okay.
And
Oh
then
no.
I like went whole back, like, okay, this needs to be included as this is a major game changer.
Right.
However, I still hold on to some of the different things that we previously had. As while there with JSON type templates, there allows us to create some things a lot easier than we previously were able to do. I'm guessing that there are still going to be some stores that will be relying on old .liquid templates, as not everyone is going to move on to the usage of the new JSON templates, as
Okay.
it would require a lot of rework and adjustments. So it is important for the developers to be familiar with both JSON type templates and the old liquid type templates.
Okay.
Uh, as for the JSON type templates, it might be easier to explain the liquid type templates first. Basically, liquid type templates were designed in such a way that it allows you to create multiple templates for any type of page that you have. For example, you can create a number of collection type templates, product pages, or basic type pages. However, the problem here was that any section that you add on one template will be visible on any type of template. For example, if I create a product template one and I add 3 different sections, those 3 sections will be visible on all of those, and it will generally be hard coded, and developers had to go through a lot of work to adjust those and make them work in a way that the client requested. And if, for example, a client would like to let's say to remove a section or to reposition them, they would have to either go jump in the code or to ask a developer to change their position. And later, when JSON type templates were included, it allowed developers to create a different type of templates, which would allow the store owners to utilize Shopify drag and drop feature inside Theme Editor to reposition the element, to repeat any elements as many times they would like, to change their content without adjusting a single piece of code. And they can even create any number of duplicate templates all within from the Theme Editor without having to do the boring part of manually creating a duplicate template that we with previous liquid type templates had to do.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. I have found it really fun to work with as like a mediocre .NET developer working with a lot of legacy code. Just even the syntax with the percent signs reminded me of old web forms, and it uses the same string interpolation thing, kind of as Angular. So, what other stacks do you like to work with besides Liquid?
Well, recently I jumped into a combination of React, Next.js, and TypeScript, and I
Nice.
can say they're currently in love with those.
Yes.
And yeah, it gives you a lot of pleasure in working, as you can build a lot of things. And I especially like TypeScript, as I like
I
having someone
love TypeScript,
standing
man.
behind me and yelling me, "You're doing that wrong."
Exactly. It's so much better. And that was finally like, oh, okay, front end is not horrible anymore. because we have TypeScript. Also
Yeah,
by
I
Vite or
mean,
C Sharp.
as whenever I can, I'm trying to include it in any projects that I can, and I'm glad to see that it is accepted by other people as well.
Most Shopify projects you work on, do you get to use TypeScript? Probably not.
Sadly, no, I haven't had the opportunity to work on some large scale projects.
Okay,
However, I am in a discussion about potentially being included as consultant in one, but
nice.
the consultation is still in progress.
Okay. Well, they would be crazy not to hire you. So, what was it like writing a book with Packt? I have a secret dream of writing a technical book. Give us all the details.
Very, very hard question.
Okay.
Uh, to be honest, I haven't. That wasn't my great idea. I haven't had the dream like
Okay.
for long. I remember one day, I basically was finishing some my basic work when I was reached by a Pact employee, and they
Okay.
told me that they have heard from me from other people. Someone has recommended me. They were asking like they were trying to find someone who would be competent enough to write a book, as they have found that many people have reached out to them asking that they have had problems on learning Liquid,
Right.
as the documentation was a bit scarce and wasn't very well connected. So they reached out to me, and the first question that I asked was, "Why me?" And they
Right.
told me that they've heard of me from other developers, which I later found out who it was. As basically when I worked in my past at my past job, I worked as a lead developer, and amongst other things, my job was to train and interview the new developers that join us, and I basically tutor them from the ground up to the stage where they became a stable independent developers. So I had a lot of knowledge in training developers, writing tutorials, and everything. And when they reached out to me asking me whether I was interested, I knew that was one question that even though I wasn't exactly sure on whether I can do it or whether I should do it, I knew that was something like, okay, this is something that you say yes, and later you'll figure it out how you're going to do this.
Right.
And,
Right.
and basically,
So they go through
when I
referrals. Interesting.
yeah,
So just by asking around in the Shopify
yeah,
community.
they have been asking
I had a
around, and someone
conversation with
can
being
pointed
amazing.
them out to me. It
Wow.
was pretty
That's really
cool.
cool. And
Yeah.
then the actual writing process,
Actually,
how long did it take you to do that?
actually, the book was entirely written in about 5 months,
Okay. That's not
uh,
too bad.
and it and actually, to be honest, some parts were a lot faster than I even expected. For example, I remember one part. I'm not quite sure, but I believe it was regarding the JSON type templates that just mentioned. It was approximately maybe 40 pages long, and I finished that in about 6 or 7 hours, if you believe.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, it was.
I couldn't do
I
that. That's
remember
very impressive.
I worked full time back then.
Okay.
I started at 7 a.m. and finished my work at 4 p.m. I had let's say half an hour break, and after that, every single day for the next 5 months, I sat about approximately 4 to 5 hours after work and writing.
Wow.
And it was pretty interesting. And I remember that I did. What astounded me is that I did not find it boring. Like every single day, I would just sit at my computer, I just start typing, and I look at the clock and I see that it is midnight. I was like, wow, 5 hours already.
Must be a great way to learn. The teacher learns more than the student kind of thing. So what
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it would be hypocritical to say that I haven't learned a lot during the writing and researching, as there were quite some little things that I generally missed during the time that I worked there, as you don't basically there are some things that you will never use, so you wouldn't even think about those. And that is why I wrote my book in such a way, so that my focus was on those little things, those small things that not everyone mentions. But when you use a bunch of those little things, you can create a lot of complex features that otherwise would be even hard that would be a lot harder to create, basically.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. What I think your book is awesome. What is the next book going to be?
Actually, to be honest, I haven't even thought about that until up a month ago. And up a month ago, I started thinking about potentially writing something new, as there have been a lot of changes in Shopify ecosystem recently, and there
Right.
is a lot of material. I mean, just talking about meta fields that you mentioned previously, there is like I see a whole chapter dedicated just for that topic, and but we'll
Yeah.
see. I
Shopify is
mean,
huge.
there is nothing in concrete right now, but I'm definitely thinking about something like that.
That would be great. I cannot wait to read that. Well, thank you so much for letting me grill you. I really appreciate it. That was a really great interview. I learned so much about Liquid. So thanks for listening, folks.